I've been a fan of God of War for 15 years, and I've been a fan of Metroidvanias for even longer. So when the rumors about a God of War Metroidvania turned out to be true, I made sure to express my excitement in a normal and incredibly chill way. God of War Sons of Sparta is a 2D Metroidvania that takes place at the earliest point in the God of War timeline. It took me about 20 hours to roll credits and another 5 or so to get the platinum, while exploring pretty thoroughly throughout. Before Kratos hated the gods, before he formed a pact with Ares, before he knew he was a demigod, Kratos was a regular Spartan with his brother, Deimos. Deimos was actually introduced in God of War Ghost of Sparta on the PSP, and this game fleshes him out so much more. The story of the game is pretty simple compared to most of the games in the series. The basic premise is that one of the other young Spartans has gone missing from the Agoge, and Deimos convinces Kratos to help him find him because he wants to impress a girl. Kratos is initially uninterested in pursuing this, but throughout the game you watch his love for his brother and his beliefs in the world around him grow and change in meaningful ways. This is a very character-focused story, similar to how character-focused the Norse saga has been, especially God of War 2018, but without the larger, more overarching mythological plot. The mythology is definitely here, but it takes a back seat to the main plot and really only comes into play through the help they receive and the obstacles they face on their more grounded journey to find their friend. And this journey really serves to expose each of them to the places that they need to improve themselves and the ways in which they both can learn from each other. I think that the strong point of this game's story is the relationship between Kratos and Deimos. I really see how these characters eventually became the ones we know later on, and it's so fun to pick out little bits of Kratos' character that change massively later, or that stay the same. And the one connection in this game to the Norse saga is really nice, and was something that was on my personal wish list. I wish the story had a little more meat to it, but what is here is done well, and the emotional beats are hit really nicely. It's not the most incredible story in the world, but I understand why they wanted to tell it, and I think it fits into the franchise well. As for the gameplay itself, I went on a bit of a journey with this one. For the first few hours of the game, the movement and combat felt very stiff. Obviously, it's normal in the genre to feel limited movement-wise early on, but the stiffness is something many of the genre's best avoid. Stiffness in combat is actually my main issue with Mio Memories in Orbit, which came out earlier this year. I love pretty much everything else about that game, but the combat never moved past feeling stiff, and I was worried that this game would be the same way. Luckily, as more options were unlocked and I got more used to the way the game controlled, I eventually started to really enjoy the overall feel of how things work. It still wasn't perfect, as there's some dead time after you do certain actions, where you can't perform another that feels a little longer than it should. But by the 4 or so hour mark, I was consistently accomplishing what I was aiming for and having a good time doing it. The combat itself starts out very simple. You have your spear, your shield, and a dodge roll. These are all upgraded through a pretty basic skill tree where you can unlock some new moves and new effects for things, like parrying and dodging. As you find new items, they get multiple uses both in and out of combat that adds another layer to the fights. You can also upgrade your items in a menu identical to the ones in the Norse saga. As a result of all this upgrading, the game starts out the most challenging it ever gets, and by the middle of the game I was basically steamrolling everything, beating every boss first try unless I went in with almost no health, at which point I always got it on my second try. I would have liked to see a bit more challenge towards the tail end. I understand that the team wanted to make something more accessible than a game like Hollow Knight Silksong, for example, but it feels tuned towards players who do absolutely no exploring at all, which, to me, goes against the spirit of the genre. Speaking of exploration, I was pretty consistently happy with it once I started unlocking new upgrades. As I said with the combat, the early game was a little frustrating, but as I got more used to it and unlocked new traversal options, it felt a lot more fluid to explore these areas. And I really enjoyed the level design in the game. I entered every new area with an excitement for the adventures I would have there, and I always love that feeling in a Metroidvania. For me personally, I felt the progression was really even and nice, but if you're someone who prefers to sequence break in games like this, I have a feeling, based on the ways the game gates content, that it'll be pretty hard to do that without discovering glitches. That being said, there are multiple completely optional areas, and those went a long way to help me feel satisfied in my exploration, especially when I ended up doing one that felt like it was intended for the post-game long before I rolled credits. Speaking of finding secrets, When it comes to classic Metroidvania exploration, the game takes a cue from 2024's incredible Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, as you can unlock the ability to take screenshots that are placed on your map where you took them, just like in that game. Not a feature I really use in either of these games, because my brain has long been trained to remember where things are in this genre, but a fantastic addition for new players. There are also side quests in this game, which is something that hasn't been too common in the genre until recent years, but I welcome the addition. It gives you other things to focus on and some general guidance to your exploration. There are some nice little stories with this, but just like with the main plot, nothing really all too consequential happens. None of these reach the heights of some of the wishes in Silksong, for example, but they don't really need to. They're perfectly serviceable as they are, and I appreciated their existence. The game's total package is wrapped up in some really nice presentation. The pixel art is gorgeous, and it's really cool how they took the animations from the Greek Saga games and made them work on a 2D plane. The music is also really nice. It finds a great balance between traditional God of War music and being reminiscent of the 16-bit era classics. And as I said earlier, the voice acting is really great, especially from our two leads. But there aren't any slouches in the cast, and they all do great work. That being said, there were multiple moments in the game, for me, where voice acting would cut out for a line or two, and the subtitles would still be there, or the opposite would happen, and I'd only hear the voices with the subtitles being blank. This is an example of my one major negative with this game. It's very buggy, and it makes sense that it was reportedly pushed back from its initial 2025 planned release, because even now, there are multiple really bothersome bugs. Another one on the VO front that I experienced was with a character who explains some challenge rooms to you. Every single time I walked in or walked past her after finishing one, the scene where she explains the challenges to the main duo would play again in its entirety. It got very frustrating. I also saw these weird pink blocks that would appear on screen when I respawned after death. This looks like it might have been fixed by the first update, but it was a big part of my early hours. And this isn't the only visual bug I experienced. Occasionally, when I'd walk into a room, the camera would zoom out so far that I'd see multiple rooms around me, and then it would snap back to the right spot. There were also multiple occasions where re-entering a room where a cutscene with Deimos occurred would just feature him standing there where he wasn't supposed to be anymore. These didn't hurt my enjoyment, but they were very noticeable. The main bugs that actually caused problems for me were a consistent one, where enemies would freeze in place and become impossible to hit until they started moving again, and a complete game freeze that happened twice, requiring a restart to fix. I also heard about a bug where it became impossible to save your game anymore after a mid-game boss. I didn't experience this myself, and it seems like it's been resolved now, but it felt worth bringing up in case there are more like it in other places. All in all, I had a really good time with Sons of Sparta. It's not among the greatest in the franchise or the Metroidvania genre, but it does a good enough job at both to satisfy fans like me, who are exactly who it's speaking to. Its buggy nature and early game frustrations keep it from being a completely unambiguous recommendation, but if you can look past that stuff and you're interested in a new Metroidvania to play or some God of War lore to sink your teeth into, you'll have a really great time. I personally really loved it, and I would love to see this done in the future with other franchises or other lesser explored parts of the God of War timeline. And if you are both a God of War fan and a Metroidvania fan, this is a no-brainer. Have you played Sons of Sparta? What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you would like to hear more about Metroidvanias, check out my video about how Hollow Knight Silksong can save the world, or check out my video about Metroid Zero Mission. I'll catch you next time.